Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppelliser.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful.
Hi, how's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good here. Everything is very good here. I'm gonna take it, even though like I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. Even though Halloween is my favorite time of year, it's my birthday's in October, but I've always liked it. It's like everywhere I go, it's like this is too early. It feels almost like it's like they're hurrying the holidays along, and it was like once upon a time. All right. First, it was Labor Day. Going back to school and Labor Day, barbecues, end of summer, and then you would start seeing some of the Halloween stuff, and it's like, forget that, get out. It's like, holy, this is too much. But around where I'm at, in northern Florida, believe it or not, we've already had a little bit of a temperature change. If you come out like at 4 or 5 in the morning, we already had temperatures dipping into the 60s. And I know that for some people that's the norm, but for Florida, even northern Florida, that's unusual because during the days, I mean, there's like a 20 or 25 degree difference in temperature. It's hot in the middle of the day, but it'll dip down and it's just like, those 70, 69 degrees. So yeah, you can feel that little flavor of already the seasons are changing. So let's see what happens with that. Again, I know some people had asked me about the new book that I was working on. Well, you know how they say that life gets in the way? Well, something like I was writing an article that morphed into a book. It just took over. It just, I couldn't stop myself. So I'm going to be shortly releasing a book. It's called The Phantoms of the Follies. And basically it talks about this, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the Ziegfeld Follies. They were very scandalous for their time period, which is around the time of the flappers, jazz era, prohibition, and Florence Ziegfeld, he put together these like a review of girls, and scantily clad, of course, and that a lot of them had some really interesting stories, to the point that there was not, I don't want to say a joke, but there was also almost a story told about a curse being placed on some of these people involved with the Ziegfeld Follies, and that's what the book is about. It's really interesting. Anyway, I will let you guys know once I release it first on Kindle. I'll give you a link for it, and also when it's going to go for pre-order. And then my other Sybil book, which I'm still working on, which went on the back burner, I'm going to have to delay maybe releasing that, maybe December, maybe January, it depends. One of those things that happens, but I'll keep you guys posted as to what's happening with that. Okay, now let's get on to the good part. The good part is who I have as a guest today. And this gentleman, this is the first time he's on Stories of the Supernatural. His name is Tim R. Swartz. And he is an Indiana native. Hold on a minute, I just unplugged my headphones, Marlene. Here we go. He is an Indiana native and Emmy Award-winning television producer, videographer, and he's the author of a number of popular books, including The Lost Journals of Nikola Tesla, America's Strange and Supernatural History, Tim R. Swartz's Big Book of Incredible Alien Encounters, Gef the Talking Mongoose, Time Travel, Fact Not Fiction, Richard Shaver, Reality of the Inner Earth, Admiral Byrd's Secret Journey Beyond the Poles, and he is a contributing writer for books such as Brad Steiger's Real Monsters, gruesome critters and beasts from the dark side, and real ghosts, restless spirits, and haunted places. As a photojournalist, Tim has traveled extensively and investigated paranormal phenomena and other unusual mysteries from such diverse locations as the Great Pyramid in Egypt to the Great Wall in China. He has worked with national and international television networks. He has also appeared on the History Channel's program Ancient Aliens and the History Channel Latin America series Contacto Extraterrestre. His articles have been published in magazines such as Mysteries, Fate, Strange, Atlantis Rising, UFO Universe, Flying Saucer Review, Renaissance, and Unsolved UFO Reports. As well, Tim is a writer and editor of the online newsletter Conspiracy Journal, a free weekly email newsletter considered essential reading by paranormal researchers worldwide. He's also the host of the webcast program Exploring the Bizarre, heard Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at kcoreradio.com. And just a few weeks ago, he released a new book titled Alien Artifacts, Incredible Evidence of Exotic Material from UFO Encounters, and we're going to talk to him about that, absolutely. But help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Tim?
Hi, Marlene. Thank you very much for having me as a guest on Stories of the Supernatural.
No, on the contrary, it's my pleasure. I want to ask you, how did you get involved in this field?
Well, and I'm sure that when you ask this questions with a lot of people, they'll say, oh, well, it started out when I was a kid. And that's the way it was with me, with the exception that I was kind of drug kicking and screaming into it. When I was a kid, I didn't really have any interest in these subjects. I was interested in science and astronomy, especially, and the space program, and being
that I have to laugh. I want to interrupt you real quick because you're this is great because you're absolutely right. I always get the opposite angle when people get interested in this. Keep going.
But being a kid from Indiana, I was more interested in basketball and the Indianapolis 500, racing, things like that. But around when I was in third grade, there used to be a thing that Scholastic Book Service would put out. It was a weekly paper, and all I can think of now is the Weekly World News. But that wasn't it. That was the Weekly World News, that excellent black and white tabloid with stories like "Boy Trapped in Refrigerator Eats Own Foot." That's that sort of thing. Now, this was an aggregate newspaper geared for kids of all the week's past headlines. Our teacher would hand out stories from this newspaper to people, and then we'd have to write up, like a little essay, and then, give it in front of the class. Well, one time I was given a story about flying saucers. This would have been around, 1968. And there was a UFO flap going on in certain parts of the country at the time. So this was actually a time when newspapers, when there were newspapers, would actually run these types of stories. So, I had no idea, about flying saucers or UFOs. So, I gave my story, wrote it up, and then presented it in front of the class. Well, from that day on, I was the flying saucer guy. Everyone, always they like to make fun of me. I was the guy who believed in little green men from Mars and things like that. And I was just like, I don't know any of this stuff. I don't care. But how kids are. They find something, and they pin it on you. But what started to become interesting to me is that in a group, people will make fun of you and stuff, but then later, individuals would come up to me and say, I don't believe in this stuff, but. And then they would proceed to tell me stories about, they were on vacation and their family saw, a UFO over their car, or they were sleeping at night and their dead Grandma Irma, was appearing at their bedsides. Stories like that. And, as time went on, I realized that people were actually having really bizarre, unexplained experiences and didn't know what to do about it. All right. Now, nowadays, people may have a better idea about these kinds of weird events due to reality television. I mean, you can turn on and see shows about hunting Bigfoot or UFOs or ghosts or things like that. I mean, when I was growing up, you may be able to find some paperback books at the
I think Hans Holzer was about the only one writing up ghost stories at that time.
Well, Brad Steiger. See, Brad Steiger was one of the first people that I actually ran across paperback books that you get at the drugstore at 50 cents for a book. But at that time, most people had no idea about these kind of things. And if you have somebody who is having a ghostly experience or had a UFO encounter, I think that it's only natural their first reaction is, "Oh my God, I'm crazy," And so when people would come to me with these stories, and I would listen to them, which was something that most of them, didn't get that opportunity because, you would never go and tell your friends or your family is the worst, for fear of just being teased. I mean, Thanksgiving
forever after you will be known as that person. In the
exactly.
family.
Thanksgiving will be a nightmare for the rest of your life. He saw a ghost, what have you.
Kind of thing, yeah.
And so I would always tell people, you can tell me these stories. I'm not here to judge you or anything like that. I probably am not going to be giving you any kind of explanation of what's going on. Sure. That's what the mystery is all about. But you can be assured that if you tell me this story, I'm not going to laugh at you. More than likely, I'm going to tell you, other people have had the very same kind of experience. So, it's not anything that you're going to worry about that you're losing your mind.
Sure.
And so many people, boy, I tell you, it's really gratifying because you can see that weight lifted off their shoulders. They may never tell anybody else their experience ever again, but just knowing that that they're not crazy, that
right, or that even the person, besides not laughing at them, that person can say, I can't tell you what it is, but I have heard other people tell me a similar story.
Yes.
Because they kind of sometimes, I think people feel like the universe picked on them.
Right.
And knowing that there's other people out there that have had that same thing, and almost like they feel like it's a cloud over them, it makes them feel better.
Well, a lot of people feel isolated.
Yes.
Because they may not know that other people have had these kinds of experiences, and because they dare not tell anybody else, they have to live with that. And considering all the types of weird things that happen, to people on this planet throughout history, there's some really bizarre stuff that, I wouldn't blame somebody for thinking that something's wrong with them, especially you look at some of these really bizarre cryptid sightings, Dogman, or the winged creatures that look like they've jumped off of a medieval tapestry. So I mean, that's really what got me going with all of this, are these individual experiences that people had. People who weren't looking for publicity or to make any money. They just had something weird happen to them, and they need to tell somebody.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna at least be able to tell one person, and hopefully you're not gonna be like, what?
Right, exactly.
I think for a lot of these people, I think that besides the fear of them not being believed, or like you said, the family, they kind of almost, I think that to some of them, depending on what their experiences, the reality shifts, their paradigm it's difficult, because all of a sudden you see or experience something that you thought didn't exist. And for some people, this is really difficult to adjust. Like, my life was so great before now, when these things were either sci-fi or something you'd see in the movies, and then all of a sudden your reality kind of like goes sideways. People don't realize that depending on your temperament, that could really be exhausting to try to be normal, in other words, once you're aware of this?
For most people, we live our daily lives almost like a robot. We get up, have our breakfast, drive to work, come home, have dinner, watch TV, go take the kids to softball or whatever. You go to bed, do it all over again. If, say, you're going to work the next morning and suddenly this disc-shaped craft lands in front of you and the little guys come out and gather up rocks and plants, jump back in, and it flies away, where do you categorize that in your brain? We all have like little filing systems in our head. Sure. Where, our daily mundane lives are filed away. Go to work, okay, it goes in this file. Drink coffee, goes in this file. Little gray guys coming out of a flying saucer. There's no filing system for that. So, I mean, for a lot of people, it does. It just completely discombobulates their lives.
Well, think about it. If you, let's say that experience that you just described, somebody sees a flying saucer, right? We're not even talking abduction, just a flying saucer, unmistakably. Right. And I'm thinking, and then I've heard also, that also it opens the door. What else is out there that supposedly doesn't exist that now can? It could be like mind altering for a lot of people, because it's just then the horizon becomes really fuzzy as to what really is out there.
Oh yes, exactly, and so many people, their lives have been fundamentally changed because of these experiences. Now, it's like I said before, I think because of reality television, for better or worse, has exposed more people to the ideas that bizarre things happen. But again, there is that difference between something that you're seeing on television and then something that you have experienced in real life. And I think a lot of people will kind of have this macho type of attitude. Oh well, if I see a ghost, I'll punch it. No. Most people, when they see something that they cannot explain, they generally freeze and just watch what's going on with their mouth hanging open, and then
or run. It's like,
it's a lot of times people don't, though. That's the funny thing, because that's I know that my daughter, my 16-year-old daughter, she says, oh well, if I ever saw anything weird like that, I would run. And well, would you really? Most people, they find themselves frozen at the spot until actually everything is that fight or flight response, except it's more like the deer in the headlights type of situation. It's only afterwards that they either run or break down into tears or have an existential crisis
or vomit or
oh my gosh, that's that happens a lot. Crying, like I said, crying, a lot of people will break down into tears, and just because it's just such a life altering experience.
Tim, let me ask you, once you started getting involved in this field, because I've heard of people that once you start getting involved in a field, all of a sudden things start happening to you. Either you witness things or you experience things. Did that ever happen to you?
Well, I have had unusual experiences, but I do tend to kind of be the ghost or paranormal repellent.
Well, and the reason why I say this is like even I'm not even talking paranormal. I'm even talking, let's say, UFO sightings. I've heard of people that get involved in this field and before they had never had any type of experiences, none. And all of a sudden, it's like when you immerse yourself in this, whether it's writing about it or interviewing people or gathering data, and then all of a sudden, it's almost like you start pulling in this like a magnetic, to have these experiences. Or weird stuff that it's like, man, this is unusual. It's almost like you're like pulling these things in just because once you open that door kind of deal.
Right, right. Well, and it is true. I think that that people who start becoming interested in this kind of stuff and open their mind to it, um, it's almost like you become a spotlight in the other realities that at times can draw these things to you. And I'll have to put certain kinds of UFO experiences right up there with ghosts and certain kinds of cryptids. There does seem to be almost a unified field theory when it comes
Right.
to these things. So I have a tendency to kind of lump them all together. But I mean, yeah, I mean, in my research and investigations, I have had some truly unexpected and bizarre situations happen to me, but also a lot of times, say like if I'm with a group and we're looking at a location that has reportedly, has had paranormal activity. A lot of times, nothing will happen when I'm there.
Right.
But as soon as I leave, then all the stuff starts happening. The furniture moves
Oh,
around, and
sure.
the
That's a
blood
giving.
falls from the wall, and
And you know what? And I tell everybody because I've been doing investigations since the 1990s. And in other words, like I tell everybody, this is when you had to pay to develop film, back then,
Yep.
before the reality shows and all this. And, and I understand that these reality shows, basically their premise more than anything is entertainment. But I have to laugh because they go to all these places and of course something always happens and that's not the reality of
No.
this field. You could go and sometimes nothing happens. Or you're lucky if you get like a squeak. And then other times you go and if you try to figure out, yeah, some people will say, well, sometimes it has to do maybe an anniversary. But bottom line, have you ever tried to time it? Why? You never will get a really good idea why some days or some nights or whatever you get full blast or something really like wow that everybody experiences. And then other times you go and you're lucky if you get like a chill down your spine. That's the best. Who knows what goes on in the supernatural side of things. So when you see some of these shows that every time they go something happens, it's like okay, all right. And I tell everybody, a lot of people that get involved in this, doing these joining these groups, later on they find that sometimes they're bored because they go out to some of these places and it's like yeah, that's it, that's the part they left out.
Right, right. Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, and when you go to these places, you also have to be prepared to run into the very mundane explanations.
Sure.
Creaking pipes, animals in the walls.
Yes.
Sometimes it ends up being just the most simple explanations. But I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt, and of course, if a family, say, is undergoing something that they feel is beyond the realm of the ordinary, then anything that happens can really cause that to escalate, so that any creak in the walls or a branch brushing against the windowsill can be interpreted as something
Right.
something supernatural. So I mean when I was doing more active ghostly investigations, I would always sit down and talk with the families first, and I had people who were with me as well who were very good at just being able to calm people down and assure them that even if there wasn't a logical explanation to what was going on, that the majority of the time there really wasn't anything to be afraid of. That most of the time these experiences, really have a half-life, so to speak, where you'll have a lot of activity, and then maybe nothing will happen for a while. Then it comes back and has a lot of activity, but then it generally then goes away and doesn't come back again. And of course, anybody that would be afraid that they were dealing with some kind of demonic or evil types of entities. We would assure them that that's probably not the case. And if you are dealing with some kind of paranormal element, that you have to remember that it's like an echo chamber. If you react to it in a way, say like, oh my gosh, there's demons in the house, and start hanging up crosses and, get the holy water out and things like that. Well, whatever this intelligence is, whatever it is that is going on, and who knows, that's why we're doing all this stuff. That's why we're looking into it, to try to make these determinations. It's going to go and say, well, if you think that, I'm a demon or evil spirit, hey, guess what? I'm a demon or evil, then next thing
I'd love to see you guys running around.
Well, exactly. The crosses get turned upside down, the Bibles are burned, and things like that. I know that there was one case, it wasn't us, I can't remember who it was that did this, but they were at a house that was being haunted by a poltergeist, and one of the investigators erroneously said that they had heard that poltergeist enjoyed ripping the heads off of photographs.
Oh.
And that wasn't the case. That was just something that they thought they had heard, but that's not something that you really see a lot. Well, then, sure enough, the next day, photographs in the house started having the tops of the pictures ripped off. So this phenomenon does have a tendency to be what you think that it's going to be. It's got its own tricks up its sleeve, but if you're supplying it with some kind of energy in the forms of belief systems, then it's going to mimic those belief systems a lot of times.
Oh, absolutely. I tell everybody, back 20 years ago, let's say, people, by the time they ever called anybody, if they did, they had already gone through the electrician, they had already called the plumber, they themselves had gone through trying to figure out what it was that was causing the disturbance, whatever it was. By the time they called somebody in, it was a very hush-hush, because they were at their rope's end. They couldn't figure out what it was. I say, fast forward 20 years, now family hears some weird noise, everybody runs out and sleeps in the car. Because we've been primed that now, like you just were saying, any weird noise or something, it cannot be a logical explanation. Like the wind or a trapped animal or something. No, it's the ghost. Maybe, and of course everybody, including the dad, everybody's like, grab your blanket and a pillow. We're sleeping in the car.
Well, and I think that a lot of people, would be excited by that prospect for some reason.
Yes.
I know that. It's like you were talking about at the beginning of the program. Halloween's coming up soon, and there are a lot of people.
Yeah, but the thing is that once upon a time, Halloween was like only a little time of the year. Now it's like 365, where people like get caught up in that.
Hey, that's fine with me. Halloween's my Christmas,
There you go. Yeah, it's like I love Halloween, but it was like, how can I say? Once you take how can I say it? Because I loved Halloween. I liked when people would actually go trick or treating and all that great stuff. But it was like, it takes the specialness out of it, because it was that one time of the year where, hey, you dressed up if you were a kid, even when later on, what costume were you going to get, if you went to a party, and that was it. That was like, that's why it was special. It's the one time of the year that, you heard ghost stories and all that stuff. That's like, something becomes, what is it, familiarity breeds contempt kind of deal, even though I'm not contemptuous, but yeah, that kind of thing. And, but yeah, some people they get too involved with it, as far as, like you said, not regular stuff that most people would not, once upon a time people wouldn't pay attention to that. Oh, that's strange. It must be a bird, it must be a plant, it must be whatever. I'm too busy. Nowadays it's like, did you hear that? That kind of...
That's right. It's great grandma from the beyond.
Yes.
trying to communicate with us.
Yes.
Can you hear us, grandma?
Yeah,
rap
exactly.
on the walls,
That thing's on a life of its own. Yes. Then it'll be a TikTok video. Yes.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But let me ask you, did you ever hear, and I've spoken to some people who have said that sometimes there's, if you want to call it, not a coincidence, but an uptick of where they have, let's say, UFO sightings, let's say in a certain area, and then they'll have, let's say, an uptick in sightings of, let's say, of cryptids or Bigfoot. Okay. Where it's almost like, of course, and the only time it's visible is for somebody that's tracking that continuously, where they'll say, wow, all of a sudden I'm realizing that we get one and we get the other. And some people, by the way, some people believe in UFOs, but they don't believe in Bigfoot, and the other way around. Have you heard of that?
Oh yes, yes, definitely. And well, and I will say that I have friends who, on both sides of the aisle, that are like they're Bigfoot researchers and think that the whole UFO stuff is just crazy. It's like people believe in these UFOs now. Bigfoot, and the same way like with ghosts and hauntings, people be like, oh yeah, we think that there's a reality to ghosts and hauntings, but those people over there talking about Bigfoot and UFOs, ooh, they're crazy.
Yes, exactly.
But but yeah, see, you can. There's some very good correlations between if you are having an area that's experiencing a flap in, say, like UFOs or cryptids, then more than likely you're going to see an increase as well in sightings of ghosts and spirits. All these things seem to go hand in hand. For whatever reason, because there are some areas on the planet that there seems to be continuous activity of these kinds of things. It may go on for a couple of years and then kind of fade away for a while, but then they come back again. And this is not uncommon. I mean, right now, everybody's all excited about the Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
This is a location that is probably fits within this category, and I mean it could go for another couple of years, and then all of a sudden stop, and nothing will happen again for years and years. And then when people least expect it, it'll come back up again. You've got like Marley Woods, which is located in Missouri, which has activities very similar to what's going on at Skinwalker Ranch. It just, the investigators have kept the location private, because of the people who live in that area. I mean, they don't want it turning into a carnival like Skinwalker Ranch has become.
And you know what? That's when you say that, I had heard, and I don't know how true this is, that when Bigelow still owned Skinwalker Ranch, that's why he closed it down at the end. In other words, because a lot of the activity had died away, and they were hoping that if they just left things alone and not allow people to go around and none of the that it would bring back some of the activity that they had found originally when they started. And I guess based on what I'm seeing, because I've been following that show, it seems like it's come back. But yeah, I heard exactly what you described, that it kind of like eased off. And who knows why that is.
Yeah, and that's just it. My good friend, the late Tim Beckley, he always liked to tell the story about he had gone to investigate some UFO landing reports in Ohio. All right.
Okay.
So and one of these cases involved this father and son and their dog, who had seen this UFO land in the field behind their house. Well, when they went out to check it out, the dog ran ahead of them and then disappeared. And the next day, it was found dead in the field. Looked like it had been crushed with some kind of heavy weight. All right. So Beckley had gone around to some of the neighbors' house to ask if anybody else had seen anything unusual that night, or or even beforehand. And he said this one woman, came to the door, and he was talking to her through the screen, and she is like, no, haven't seen anything like that. He goes, but has anybody told you about the Bigfoot that people have been seeing around in the area?
I love it. I love it.
And she proceeded to tell the story on how this big hairy creature would come out behind her house, and they had one of those window air conditioners up on the second floor. And she said she thought that this thing was getting under this air conditioning to drink the water, that was dripping out of it, because they would find like footprints, like huge footprints.
Right.
Underneath where this air conditioner was. So yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of times that these kinds of experiences do go hand in hand with each other. That it's not always the case, but anybody who does the legwork and is willing to actually listen to what people are having to say will find that a lot of times there does seem to be some kind of connection between one or the other. What that connection is,
and,
who knows?
You have some people that say, well, it's like, that basically the UFOs or the extraterrestrials are the handlers of the Bigfoot. I kind of lean more towards, if they're maybe doing some interdimensional travel, maybe there's a rip and these Bigfoot are going back. Who knows? It could be anything. Maybe the Bigfoot is taking advantage of maybe a portal to jump in and out of, or maybe not at all. Maybe Bigfoot is a totally normal, natural animal or human. I don't know really what to call it. That has no type of extraterrestrial connection. Period.
Right. That's
who knows?
There's a cartoon I saw recently that showed a landed flying saucer, and the little gray guys are out, like, looking at plants and stuff, and one of them turns to the other and said, you left the pet gate open and now the Bigfoot got out. And you see in the distance like Bigfoot wandering away from the flying saucer. So I mean, yeah, people have made that comparison, and there have been cases. I know that there was one in Turkey in the early 1960s where witnesses saw a UFO crash into some woods, and a Bigfoot type of creature jump out of it and then disappear into the forest. So I mean, you've got all kinds of unusual connections that I mean, you really you can really break your head, break your mind, trying to figure it all out.
Now that you mention about that UFO crashing, that what was it, July or June was the anniversary for Roswell. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I know your last book you were talking about people that have collected stuff. Do you think? I mean, from what I understand, from what little I've read, the guy, Brazel was his name, I think, or something. He was the first. Right, Mac was. He was the one that innocently came forward, from what I understand, and later on he was like sorry because it caused him so much grief.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Do you? What do you think of Roswell? Was it real? Was it a stunt? What do you think it was?
Well, I definitely think that something happened there, but so much time has gone by. Mm-hmm. That it's at this point it's almost impossible to tell. Most of the people who were involved have passed away,
right.
and there's been others who have really done their best just to throw as much dirt and mud and everything they can onto it to almost hide the facts. But it's really impossible to tell anymore.
Right, without somebody that says I was there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you did have people who did say that they were there, that one way or the other. I mean, the Jesse Marcel, who was there on the base, and I mean, and claimed to have actually have handled some of the material and actually managed to briefly bring some home for his family to see. He was a guy, and then later his son, who after he grew up, confirmed that this had actually happened, but you're all you're left with really are these stories of some kind of unusual debris, and it wasn't until really years later that some of these other stories about say like a separate section of this craft that was found a little bit later that actually contained alien bodies and stuff like that. That kind of stuff may have actually have been added on years later. So
do you think
again,
I'm not gonna use the Men in Black thing. I mean the typical what we think of as Men in Black, but do you think that maybe a lot of witnesses or people that knew were basically got a call from the government and said, "Shut up"? And contrary to what people think, most people would think, "Why am I can't complicate my life this way. Let me just keep my mouth shut."
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, and yeah, I mean that was a guarantee that at the time there was this hush hush cover that was pulled across it. I mean, and some of the witnesses were definitely. If they were civilian, especially, they their lives were threatened.
That's what I understand.
That they were, that they could easily disappear into the desert as one
or suffer some accident or something.
Yeah, very very mafioso, type of thing. It'd be a shame.
Right, because I think that a lot of people sometimes have a hard time. That's what I'm saying. When I say Men in Black, I'm not talking about how you see the Men in Black and the Black Cat. I'm not saying whether that's true or not. I'm just saying about intimidation by somebody from the government, especially back, let's say, in the 60s when this happened, where you were like, I'm just a little one person, or I can't risk myself or my family. Because, some
Right.
people will think, I think naively, oh no, if I knew that, I'd go to the newspapers and it's like, I don't think it's that simple. If you get somebody who, in other words, you're not going to find out if they're bluffing. How's that?
Right, right. Well, and as well, I mean, if you had a military connection, then I mean, you had to, I mean, you had that non-disclosure, agreement.
Right.
People back then. I mean, this is coming right out, after the end of World War II, and so if you were told by your superiors that you're not going to say anything for the rest of your life, well, then you don't say anything for the rest of your life, and of course some of these people, I mean, they were threatened, with their military pension. Well, we can just easily take that away from you, if you say anything. But the thing is that you have to remember that at the time that whatever happened outside of Roswell, the thinking of the military wasn't really along the lines of, we've got a crashed spaceship here. UFOs had just started coming into the news at the end of June, and Roswell happened maybe around, no one's quite sure, maybe around July 4th or 5th, around that time. And the first UFOs that were sighted that really started the whole modern UFO era that got all the attention of the media happened around June 24th. So, I mean, that's not a lot of time. So at the time, the military was actually worried, could this be something from the Soviet Union?
And I understand that, believe it or not. I truly understand. They had good reason to be concerned.
Yes. Well, and then the other thing, which a lot of people don't realize, again, this is at the, not too long after the end of World War II, the Nazis were still very much in people's minds. So there was also the fear that could this be something from Nazis that have gotten away from us, hiding in South America or someplace like that, or kind of a combination of the two, Nazis who are now working with the Soviet Union. I mean, the United States was doing it.
Yeah,
we brought
right. And,
over
and
a
and people sometimes
ton.
lose that perspective because we're living 50 or 60 years, away from that moment. But like you said, World War II had occurred, what, less than 20 years before. People involved, whether it was the military, the Nazis, were very much alive and young. It wasn't like they were old and feeble.
Right.
So the idea that they could be working, like you said, with the Russians or God knows what, it wasn't like a far-fetched idea at all.
Nope, nope, no, definitely not. So, I mean, the whole idea that the United States government and military knew right away that we were dealing with extraterrestrial spaceship. I mean, that's myth. That's a mythology. That wasn't something that didn't start occurring to people till really maybe later in 47, 48. It's even though the people were very familiar with science fiction from pulp magazines and things like that, the consideration that we could be dealing with something from another planet was probably one of the last things the military was thinking about at the time.
Do you, because I know you've researched this, prior to Roswell, like you said, the 60s, after the Cold War, and, of course, was there any other sightings or discoveries made that, looking back at it now, it's like this was some type of extraterrestrial crash, but it just wasn't recognized for that back then?
Well, there is the alleged crash of something in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, that happened, I think, 1942, something like that. That has been really extensively investigated, and with names of people who were there when it happened, and it was one of these things that it was, I guess it was well known within the community for years afterwards, but again, it's because I mean, it's not that isolated, but most of the country, before the interstate system, really just we're kind of on their own. So if you had a situation where something weird like that happened, and then the military came and took all this stuff away, and that was it, then you would be left with just stories that your aunties would be talking about that happened 20
right,
years
yeah,
ago.
that it was like, and got, it's like a folk, like a family, word of mouth thing. And the reason why I asked you this is, I understand, like, let's say you look at the shows of Ancient Aliens where they'll point out, extraterrestrials visited us in ancient times. The reason why I asked you this was, I'm thinking, did us in World War II dropping the bomb, did they capture the attention of these extraterrestrials that before weren't around, or were not being very, in other words, or we got more because of the deployment of the bomb,
Right.
And this is why all of a sudden we saw these sightings of what the typical flying saucer kind of thing and things of that. Was this the trigger? There's like, oh my God, these humans, what are they doing?
Well, there had been UFO sightings,
Right.
probably since the beginning of time. I mean, there's you look in the Bible or other old manuscripts, and there are descriptions of, say, like flaming shields in the sky, or the fiery chariots, that sort of thing. So it's. I think the UFO phenomena has been with us since the very beginning, and there have been historic outbreaks. I mean, you had the airship flaps that took place, say, like over the United States, starting, I think it was around 1897, where people were seeing what looked like giant dirigibles. Sometimes they had wings and big propellers, but a lot of them had like giant searchlights. And so, I mean, and this was something that seemed to spread across the country at certain times. Some of these reports, naturally, were hoaxes perpetrated by newspapers who wanted to get in on the fun. so to speak. The journalistic integrity. Back then,
It's like, oh, it's harmless.
well, yeah, that's kind of what it was. It was almost to be, a lot of these newspapers. I mean, they were very tabloid-esque. I mean, they would cover the real news and stuff, but then they would throw in some fun stuff as well. And I think that a lot of people who go into these older archives looking for these things have trouble mistaking, or telling the difference between the two. But there were a number of very legitimate sightings, of these airships. There was also cases that happened in the early 1900s, as well. So it's there does seem to be, though, a historic uptick after the end of World War II of UFOs that, I mean, people naturally, have attributed to our growing development of atomic weapons. So, yeah, there probably is a correlation to that, and of course, again, the early contactee movement, which started in the early 1950s, the Space Brothers, as they were called,
Right.
They were very concerned with our atomic tests and our atomic bombs, telling these people that these weapons not only had the ability to destroy the planet, but somehow could also affect the solar system and the galaxy, and other aspects far away from Earth. So
That's interesting. I have
yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, I've often speculated that rather than dealing with extraterrestrials like they claim to be, we may be dealing with a race or races that are living on the planet with us. They've just kept
Oh my
themselves.
God, you brought that up. That is great. I'm glad you did, because I was running across information like that where the extraterrestrials are not extraterrestrials. They're earthlings, for lack of
Yeah.
a better word.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The ultra terrestrials, which is, I mean, that's always been a favorite, subject of mine, and it does kind of make sense though, because you wouldn't think, and who knows? I mean, we only understand a small percentage of how the universe works, but you wouldn't think that atomic weapons being used on Earth would have the ability to affect the entire solar system or galaxy like these beings were saying. However, if you're dealing with a race of, say, cousins, not
Right.
not exactly humans, but another species that evolved alongside of us, but somewhere along the lines decided that they wanted to get away as far away from us as possible.
Right.
Moved underground. Maybe have the technology to allow themselves to move underwater, what have you. So, us using atomic weapons, that's going to threaten them as well,
Sure.
And because of their secretive nature, they're not going to come out and say, hey, we're living in in those underground caverns in that
Yeah.
mountain there, and your atomic weapons, they could blow us up as well. No, I mean,
Yeah.
if people learn that, what's one of the first things they're going to do? They're going to lob atomic weapons right into those caverns.
Especially back then, it'd be
Yeah,
like,
oh, yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the enemy. That is
Right,
the enemy.
right. So so you have these things that maybe have a technology that's just a little bit ahead of ours. Not too much more, but maybe just a little bit, and then have like the ability to make things appear to be a lot more technologically superior than they actually are. And then they'll come and they'll say, "Hey, yeah, we're from other planets. Stop that. Just quit it." The space gods say, "Cut it out."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know what? We have to open our minds to that possibility. Like maybe Jules Verne, wasn't so far off. Such Journey to the Center of the Earth. all these so-called stories about an interior world inside the earth, et
Hmm.
cetera, et cetera. And here we're looking out for the extraterrestrials, and they've been under our feet maybe all along, kind of thing.
Well,
That's
I mean,
possible.
we do know that there are places on the planet that have, like vast cavern systems that are
Mm-hmm.
really old and appear to have been augmented, so to speak, sometime in the past. Maybe they were natural at one time, but there is evidence that somebody came in and smoothed out the walls, made these places bigger, and some of these places in Central and South America have never been fully explored. They go back so
Mm-hmm.
far. Some of the places have had cave-ins where
Sure.
like an entrance has been sealed off. So I mean, I, I'm not going to say, because one of the popular theories, especially in the late 50s and early 60s, was that the Earth was hollow. I mean,
Right.
we're not talking about like caverns
It
and
was like there's
tunnels and
nothing
things
there.
like that.
Yeah.
Right, right. That maybe the crust is 500 miles thick, and the inside is then completely hollow, with continents and oceans, on the
Mm-hmm.
other side, maybe even like a little miniature sun as well. It's fun and it makes for good science fiction, but
Right,
it's
but
it's probably unlikely. But the tunnels and caverns, we know they exist, and probably there's a lot more out there that has yet to be discovered.
I know that you wrote a book, all right, that you talk about birds. What was it? Secret Journey Beyond the Poles.
Right, right.
And you know that there's always been a lot of going on about either whether it's Antarctica. What is that about? I didn't know that there was something that he did off the records. Is that what you're saying?
There was a book that came out in the 1960s that was called Admiral Byrd's Secret Diary. All right.
Okay.
And this allegedly was it was actually more like a logbook than a diary that purported to be one of Byrd's airplane expeditions across the Arctic. All right, and this it was alleged to have happened in sometime in late 1947 and 48. In this logbook, it details how him and his pilot and radio operator had actually, while they were making this flight over the North Pole, were intercepted by flying saucer types of craft that then came over the radio and instructed the aircraft to follow them, where they were taken to a giant cavern entrance, and then into the hollow earth.
Oh,
And once they got there, they were taken to this great city, almost like a Shangri-La
mm-hmm.
type of place, where they met with the like the ascended masters, or the high council of the,
Okay.
the underground world, and were given messages very similar to what came out from the contactees, the Space Brother movement, like people like George Adamski and Howard Menger, that we're messing around with atomic weapons. We don't know what we're doing. We're going to blow themselves up. Doing so is also going to affect them. If we don't stop, they're going to come to the surface and kick our collective butts.
Okay.
And then they let Bird go, and they came back. And
Okay.
this document actually for a long time was what was called a samizdat, which is a document that is published through copy machines. Okay, somebody would get a copy of it. They would make copies and then send it on to other people. All right,
Okay.
and then at some point, once again, my friend Tim Beckley with his publishing company, Interlight Global Communications, actually published this as a book. Gosh, I mean, probably maybe in the early '80s. This was the first time this book had actually been published. But then, years later, Tim Beckley came to me, and because at this point the book had been probably out of print for a while, and he was thinking about, maybe we should, reprint it. So he gave it to me and had me, look it over and says, see what you can do with this, and see if any of this, could be true. And then we'll publish what you come up with alongside republishing the Lost Diary of Admiral Byrd. Well, once I got looking into it, I discovered that actually Admiral Byrd, at the time supposedly that he was flying over the Arctic, he was involved with a military operation called Operation High Jump. And this was something that this happened again after the end of World War II, starting in the about early 1947. And at that point, the military and the Navy were decommissioning ships. They didn't need them anymore. No reason to have all these ships. So they decided, well, let's get these ships back online, and we'll have this great big expedition to Antarctica. We'll have all these ships, a submarine, a small aircraft carrier, lots of military personnel. We'll go to Antarctica. And they had various reasons why they were going. They were going to, look for possible valuable minerals. They were going to train soldiers to work under hostile Arctic type conditions, under the assumption that at some time the Soviet Union is going to come over the North Pole and invade, Canada and the United States.
Right.
So rather than sending the troops to that area to practice, no, let's send them clear on the opposite side of the globe
To Antarctica.
To Antarctica, yeah. So the years later, then. And the unusual thing about this is that they went down in it would have been the Antarctic summer, all right, which would have been the winter in the northern hemisphere, and they were supposed to be there for maybe up to 6 months. I mean, they had the ability to stay there for quite a while. And again, like I said, lots of ships, lots of military personnel, some airplanes, a little submarine. Boy, they went all out for this, expedition, whatever it is. But then after about 6 weeks, they turned around and came back.
Really?
Yeah, very, very early. And
Did you ever say why?
well, some of the rumors that have circulated over the years, and again, these are rumors, and I've looked into it and discussed the possibilities one way or the other. Was that possibly that they were actually looking for a secret Nazi base? That that Nazi Germany had taken a lot of their, especially some of their secret weapon projects, scientists, other valuable personnel and items, and sent everything down to the Antarctic, where there was already an established base. We knew that there was a base down there. We just didn't know if it was a big base or just say like a weather station type of thing.
Right.
But you had U-boat commanders that had, after the end of the war, had given themselves up in say like Argentina and places like that. And when they were being debriefed, they said that what we did was that we left South Africa taking a bunch of people and items to this base in Antarctica. And then we were instructed to, to then give ourselves, up. What we don't know is whether or not they were telling the truth or if they were hiding something else, because we do know that there were a lot of Nazi intelligence agent scientists and the like who fled to South America.
Well, but see, this is the thing. South America is more hospitable than Antarctica.
Yes.
It's like that's a big difference as far as I'm gonna hide out or whatever. Antarctica has got to be brutal.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And especially the areas that that they allegedly went to.
Right.
So the rumor has it that that was what the whole military mission was, to determine whether or not there was actually a Nazi base there, and to either try to contact it. Probably it wasn't an effort to destroy it. I don't think they really had the ability to do that. I think it was more just to assess the situation. And it could very well be that allegedly the area that they went to where they're supposed to be, they found nothing, and that was why they came back as early
That's a big
as
difference.
they did.
6 weeks versus 6 months. That's a big difference.
It is, and there were newspaper reporters embedded into this mission, especially some from various outlets in South America. And on their way back, Admiral Byrd told them that he was going to give a talk before Congress once he got back to the United States and tell them about his fears that Antarctica was going to be used as a platform to allow, as he put it, enemy missiles to fly over and attack the United States.
Oh my God.
And other countries. He did talk before members of Congress, but unfortunately, the notes of that conversation have never been released. We know. We've got Admiral Byrd spoke.
They've never released those notes?
Nope. It's in the archives that he talked, but just exactly what it was that he was talking about has never been released. Military.
We're talking a long time. Like you said, most everybody involved in that's it. They're gone.
Yep. And
you wonder.
And that's just it. Who knows if this talk has been written down and then hit with top secret and then squirreled away somewhere, which is that's one of the things about the entire UFO mystery is that even today people are still like, we're just we can't wait for disclosure, when the government's going to come forward and release all of their files and admit all the things that they've been hiding all this time.
I don't think that's going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And I think one of the major reasons, there are a couple of reasons. One of them is that the government and the military probably has no more of an idea of what's going on than we do.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Wait a minute. You know why you say, I'm so glad you brought that up, Tom, and because in prior shows, I tell everybody, everybody's got this idea of the X-Files version, worst case scenario, our government is, colluding with the extraterrestrials and agreed to hybridization. And, in other words, that they've got this whole pact, and know everything. And I was go, has anybody ever thought, what's scarier? If the government ever made a disclosure about UFO or the confirmed existence of extraterrestrials, not UFOs, extraterrestrials. I go, which situation do you think would be scarier? One, the one everybody sees on TV. Hey, we known about extraterrestrials. We've made a treaty with them, and we've maybe even agreed to let them take or abduct humans, etc., etc. And we all know about them, or The opposite. We ask government officials, what do you know about them? Well, not really that much. What do you mean? How many are there? We don't know. Where do they come from? We don't know. What do they want? We don't know. That scenario to me sometimes is scarier if people stop and think about it. You know, like what you just said, that maybe they don't know as much as we think they do. And maybe the reason they don't release information per se, besides maybe what they've collected, eyewitness stories, maybe some fragments, is because it's almost like I got these pieces, but I really don't know all this thing that supposedly we know. I'm just thinking, you know, and of course you've heard, oh, you know, some of the technology that we've had advances has been because we've, you know, back engineered, you know, extraterrestrial discoveries. What if it's not? What if we're just really smart? What if we, you know, maybe we, you know, let's not shortchange ourselves. But I'm glad you said that pointed out that sometimes maybe the disclosure that we're waiting for, that moment, that thunderclap of this is it. And everybody is going to be like, so they're just, maybe they're leading us on. And by the way, you, in that book, that, what was it, in May that they had that meeting, 50 years in the making in Congress, as talking. What do you think about that? What do you think that was about?
Well, I mean, right now there's been a lot of pressure, you know, to try to get the government and the military to look into the UFO mystery, to look into the UFO mystery publicly. See, that's the thing, because the military and the government and the various intelligence services have been looking into the UFO mystery probably, you know, since the 1940s when all of this happened. I mean, you know, we've got scads and scads of paperwork and Freedom of Information Act that has come out, and right now it's kind of the flavor of the month. You know.
So what do you think, that it was just to settle people down? Hey, yeah, we met and we discussed it, and then nothing's gonna come of it.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, you know, there is naturally there is an interest in trying to find out more about this, but you know, to put all of our trust into the government and the military to do this, you know, I mean, that's, you know, you're going down a blind alley for that. You know, it's like I said, and what we were just talking about. You know, the military may have some better photographs, maybe some videotapes, gun camera film that's been collected over the years that has never been released. But as for, like you said, secret treaties and you know, President Eisenhower, you know, meeting with the aliens and
by the way, I'm not saying that didn't happen. I don't want to say that never happened, because I might be totally off. You know, I'd be like, Marlene, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. But I'm saying there's always a possibility that it's the other end of the spectrum versus of what you're just describing, where it's
you know, it's I think that this has all been kind of encased in secrecy over the years. It's because they don't know what's going on. All right. And, you know, no government is going to come forward and say, you know, our skies have been filled with some kind of unknown aircraft that has a technology that appears to be beyond our own. There's nothing that we can do about it. We can't stop them. They fly around with impunity. We don't know what they are. You know, I think, like you said, I think that's a lot more frightening scenario than the idea that, you know, that there are, you know, extraterrestrials out there that are, you know, coming down to pay us a visit. You know, instead we're left with this, you know, the shadowy unknown. Yeah, exactly. You know, but you know, you had talked a little bit earlier about you know, like secret papers and documents that have been collected, you know, over the years, and that people have died out. You know, there could very well have been a an MJ-12 type of organization that was established, early on, within the government military intelligence service. And I'm just using MJ-12 as an example because, that's those papers were probably, fake as well. Maybe based on, something, but not those. And that, we do know that all the research that's been done has been compartmentalized through various agencies, who knows, to the point that maybe only one or two people knew, like what their section was working on.
Right.
All right. And if this information was then, say, like, afterwards put in a box and put in a warehouse somewhere, and then the people who were working with it passed away, probably that information is long since forgotten.
Even if their last one is, I'm not going to be the one to let this cat out of the bag. Sorry, you know what? And sometimes you might think, well, maybe that information per se is maybe at that point it was top secret. There was a reason to classify it. But let's fast forward 50, 60 years, whatever, and you think, okay, whatever was there, there's nothing secret about it. It doesn't matter anymore. Right. Unless releasing it, okay, the information in and of itself is not important. It's that maybe it exposes something where the government was duplicitous against the people. And people are going to say, what? You guys did what? Or you handled it that way? Like, how could you? In other words, the information in and of itself doesn't really matter. It's just the way it was handled. And that's maybe why it's kept so many years after the fact. Like, no, we're not going to let this out. And it's like, why not? Well, and I hate to say it, but I think, like the collective government doesn't like to be embarrassed.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's like, oh, you're going to fight, and it's like, well, we were expecting some big, disclosure about what extraterrestrials or UFOs or discoveries or whatever it is, and all it is that you guys don't want to be embarrassed, kind of thing. It happens. In other words, not everybody, and not everything has to be nefarious. Because let me ask you, why do you think now they're distinguishing between UFO and UAP?
I think that's come about because UFO, the word, has become synonymous with crazy. And it really has. I mean, there's been almost from the very beginning, there has been a deliberate effort to make people who have had UFO sightings or interested in investigating UFO sightings, to make them a fringe element. All right. And in fact, I mean, there have been CIA documents that have been uncovered that basically said to when it comes to people involved with this, make them look like they're nuts.
Sure, I've heard of that. Yeah.
So I think that using the term UAP is just trying to get away from from that bad seed, that bad association.
To me, I guess it all depends on your perspective. Let me ask you, do you think that, how Stephen Hawking, before he died, he kind of made a statement along the lines that if we ever actually had that encounter with an extraterrestrial, we'd come out on the short end of the stick because their technology, their advancement would put us at a disadvantage. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's, based on how humans have operated, over the years. Anytime a more advanced civilization comes into contact with a less advanced society, it's the less advanced society that tends to suffer, whether or not purposely or not. That exposure does seem to halt any kind of development that was going on in a lower tier society. It seems to take the breath, the energy out of them, because they say, why should we continue doing what we've been doing when here are these guys over here who have transistor radios and bottled soda pop. We'll just start getting stuff from them rather than continuing on with what we have been doing. So yeah, it's I think that it's a legitimate concern that if we do come into contact with an extraterrestrial race, that if it's a society that really isn't that far ahead of us, where such moral principles haven't been worked out yet, because you have the whole Star Trek thing. What was it? The Federation. I can't remember what it was.
Right. That the Prime Directive was
Prime Directive. Thank you.
Right. You would interfere in a civilization that was lesser. You would have to let it do its thing.
Right. So I mean, I do think that if a certain aspect of the UFO phenomena is dealing with extraterrestrial races, that there probably is something like the Prime Directive, going on here. There's just enough stuff that is allowed to to make people wonder, but not so much that we're going to start just throwing everything out the window and trying to totally embrace whatever the gods from outer space have to offer us.
Sure, no, and I'm thinking, and I mean, you hear all these different theories. You have the ones that pick up cattle and mutilate them, and abduct humans and use them for experiments, and then there's the other ones that are much nicer, and basically all they're here is just to study us, but they're kind of like a little bit more hands off, and but it's then of course Hollywood bleeds into everything, and then you think of War of the Worlds, and it's like
right. Well, I would dare say that we've been experiencing the UFO phenomena, like I said earlier, probably since from the beginning of time. And if they wanted to invade us, they've had plenty of opportunities to do so. But
or maybe the ones that were let's go. Maybe the ones that you see in all these ancient things in the background, whether it's the painting or the statue or what you said, the descriptions. Maybe those up and left, and the ones that are back, maybe these are different ones that, I mean, you never know what that's like an eternal question, as in, who are they? What do they want? Is there hopefully some type of rules? How's that?
Mm-hmm.
That would not permit them certain things, and that's another thing. That sometimes we put our moral compass as humans on what might be another species, that what we see as bad or evil for them, we want to put it, on the way we would look at it. Maybe what they're doing to us, they don't see it as bad. It's just because they're different. It happens.
Well, I mean, you look at, say, for example, a farmer with his livestock. He may care very much about them, take care of them, make sure that they're warm and well fed. Some of them actually, brought into the house as pets. But at the end, they're still livestock and are sent to the slaughterhouse.
Yeah,
so I mean, is the farmer being evil for doing that? It's a matter of perspective, really. And if we're dealing with certain aspects, with a society that is so far ahead of us that really we're nothing more than ants to them, then that whole moral principle is just, I mean, you just throw that out the window, because I mean, you look at how we deal with things like ants or flies or what have you on a daily basis with no thought one way or the other.
Right.
I mean, why
exactly?
Why should we be any different?
Right, and we kind of like that's kind of that's what happens when you think you're the center of the universe kind of thing. And I think we're used to that, and being at the what is it at the we're the as far as life forms, we run the show, and we feel very uncomfortable with the possibility that that's not there's something else out there that doesn't see us exactly that way. And I mean, this could go a million different ways as far as, but I'm hoping that in my lifetime we will get some type of this truthful disclosure as far as but whether we like it or not. How's that?
Yeah, I am still the UFO phenomena, I think, is really a lot more vast than we care to consider. And I'm not saying that some aspects of the UFO phenomena could be extraterrestrials from other planets. I don't think that that's the whole picture, though. I think that there are other possibilities going on as well. Things from interdimensional realities,
Sure.
time travelers, things that we would call, for want of a better word, paranormal. If you've studied the UFO phenomenon as long as I have, it's just like they're really you can't toss anything off the table because, well, here's a story that seems to show. Hi there.
So beautiful.
There are stories that seem to embrace any one of these types of hypotheses. So you need to keep an open mind and not just try to jam everything into that extraterrestrial hypothesis cubicle.
But the excuse that they've always given is that if they ever really came out and gave any type of meaningful disclosure, that the populations couldn't handle it. That people would run around, like with their heads on fire. And I think most people, especially because of the exposure through media and through the movies, maybe some people would have a meltdown, and some people would say have a couple of drinks, and then afterwards they'd say, "Okay, tell me everything." After a while, it'd be like, "Okay, now that I'm like, just tell me what it is, the truth, whatever it might be, like what we know, what we don't know." And that's the part I don't know if that's ever going to happen, I guess.
There was a survey taken a couple of years ago, and the conclusion that they came to, because everybody thinks that certain religious groups would probably be the ones that would handle it, have the least ability to be able to handle it. But actually, it was determined that it would be scientists.
Sure.
I
would say that.
Yeah, that wouldn't be able to handle it very well.
Absolutely. Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
That if you gave me a choice, I'd say, oh, absolutely. There's some scientists that, especially if that they would say whether they were non-believers or they thought it was this or that, it'd be like, no, you can't. No. They're more attached to their dogma than a lot of religious groups are.
Right.
And if you look at some religious groups, there's enough latitude there to insert extraterrestrial life in there, without altering it.
Well, there was a scientist, a guy by the name of Dr. Jim Brandenburg, and he's done a lot of research on Mars, as well as meteorites that have been found on Earth that may have, say, like microscopic fossils and other evidence of possible organic life from other places other than Earth. And he said that there was one certain meteorite that had been discovered in, I think it was the Arctic, that had come from Mars at some point, and there was things inside that had the appearance that they could be, fossils of microscopic life. For Mars, that's pretty earth-shattering. But I guess at a press conference, there was one scientist that was he was about ready to physically attack the people up at the podium, because not only was this going beyond his established scientific beliefs, but it was going against his religious beliefs as well. And the scientist was saying that this couldn't be true because the Bible says that there's only life on earth.
And that's, of course, and you know what? Some people like that, I think that it's that they're very rigid. Their personality is very rigid. Mm-hmm. Okay? And like I said, anything that you push them out of that rigid, it's like, what else is there? And that's the only way they can function. You know, I consider those people are high control people. But I would think, you know, and the reason why I'm saying this is some people think that just because you're a scientist or you're a PhD or whatever, you know, you're more. There's a lot of rigid people that have a PhD, you know, and other initials beyond their name, which are really stuck, and they don't allow for anything different than what they've either read or researched or conclusions. And sometimes there's egos attached to it, especially if they've put out a theory on something. So yeah, you can't just say, well, Dr. So-and-so said, you know, it's like, okay, but maybe there is another explanation for that. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what comes of this, because I think that a lot of the things that and I want to say that maybe since the advent where people are carrying around cameras with their phones, in other words, capturing what before we had to rely on either the government or media to kind of like dole it out. Now you've got the everyday person that's being able to capture evidence, you know, whatever it is, whether it's lights or whatever, that all of a sudden it's like, you know, we're having better access to all these stories, or no, not story, experiences that people are having. And I know some of them are fake. I know that. And some of them are just people don't understand what they're seeing. It could be something legitimate. But then when you take that out of the equation, there's still a lot of people that are bringing forward information or stories or videos or photographs of things that it's like, okay, guess what? You guys don't control the narrative totally anymore.
Right.
And I think that's what worries them a little bit. Or a lot.
You know, unfortunately, it's a lot like the photographs and videotapes of Bigfoot. You know, until we get to the point where one is accidentally, you know, hit by an 18-wheeler and we actually have its body. Same thing with UFOs. I mean, you can have all kinds of photographs and videotape, and you know, it's not going to make any difference, because nobody is going to believe it until you know, somebody actually has a physical craft.
Sure.
And you know, living beings or bodies, and even then, you know, there's going to be a lot of people who won't believe it. You know, that's one of the things that you know, the whole disclosure movement, when they say that, you know, we want the government to fess up, to come clean, release all of the information that they have, tell us the truth about the reality of, you know, extraterrestrials visiting us. And even if they did, even if the president got up in front of the country and, you know, and brought one of these guys out to wave at the camera and said, you know, here it is, you know, there would be a large portion of the population who wouldn't believe it. You know, they're just trying to get votes, or, you know.
Exactly, man. That's a great effects there.
Yeah, exactly. You know.
And you know what? Let's say somebody else made a discovery, like you said, a craft or an alien, but it wasn't the government. And now I'm saying, with as advanced as we are, this is a private party that found this evidence. Do you think they're going to run to the government? They're going to try to keep it and make money from it. I hate to say it.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Well, and you know, I mean, we've seen this before in the past, where somebody has some what appears to be very good evidence, and, you know, maybe says, you know, I'm thinking back at the times of like Project Blue Book and some of these, you know, early government and military UFO research groups. A lot of times they'd get a hold of that stuff, and then you never would see it again.
Yeah.
You know, disappeared.
And by the way, on the way out, shut up! Don't talk to anybody about this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Well, I mean, you've got I think it was I think it was the late astronaut Gordon Cooper. I can't remember exactly now, but I mean, in his younger days, when he was in the military before he became part of the NASA program, he was involved with like some film technicians. That these technicians actually got film of this small UFO type craft landing in front of them. It had like the landing gear and everything. They had their cameras running. Now, and then then they brought this to their commanding officer, who was Cooper, and he said that after the film was developed, he never saw it projected, but he held up the film and could see the craft on this film, and then he did what he had to do. He had to turn it into his superiors, and then supposedly it was going to be turned into it may have been Project Blue Book, or it may have been Grudge, which was the predecessor to Project Blue Book. Whatever, and there it disappeared. They were supposed to categorize it. There'd be a number associated with it. It would be in the files. No,
of course not.
Yeah, something like that disappeared. So how much other great material like that has been turned in, only to have it disappear, into probably a warehouse somewhere where
what
it's
I was
still
thinking,
there today.
that ending scene in Indiana Jones and the Temple of not the Temple of Doom, the first one, the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes,
where you see the guy wheeling this box and it's this huge warehouse.
Yep.
And that's what I always think of. God knows how many things are put away there.
Well, and especially if, like we had talked about before, where you had this chain of command and a need-to-know situation, you may have had people who were responsible for this stuff who are now dead. And the paperwork associated with this has even though it's supposed to be retained into various archives, probably has been thrown out. And nobody knows. Nobody knows anymore.
Nobody knows to ask for it.
Right. Well, they don't know how to ask for it. I mean,
Right.
If you go and send in Freedom of Information Act for various paperwork, you have to be very, very precise on what you are looking for, or else it'll just be returned back to you and say, well, we can't find anything, on that.
Right.
You had, too broad a parameter to what you were looking for. And, face it, most of this stuff that the military has collected over the years, and intelligence service as well, is not even available for Freedom of Information Act. It's levels above top secret. God knows, what those levels are even called. We'll never know.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, it's the most you're going to get is it's classified, and that's it.
Right.
We're going to tell you any more than that. You're going to have to take our word for it, in other words.
Well, and there's also the scenario where some of this stuff may have also been turned over to private corporations, especially those who work with, say, developing top secret aircraft and parts of the space program. These are private companies that have top secret and above clearance, so they don't have to, they don't have to pay attention to Freedom of Information.
No, they're not a government entity.
Exactly. So, I mean, you may have these corporations that have all kinds of juicy secrets that, they're trying to, develop one way or the other, for military purposes that, who knows, what they may have.
And let's face it, now in modern days, we've realized a lot of these mega corporations are just as powerful as governments.
Yes.
Once upon a time, that wasn't the scene. The government was always above everything else, but not anymore. As far as power and, like you said, if you have information and you're developing a product or whatever it is. You
Yeah.
didn't need that. Let's face it. Let's say Elon Musk and all these people going off trying to get to Mars. Before it was NASA strictly. It was the government who was doing space research or space, rockets or space travel. That was it. And now it's like, yeah, get out of the way. We need to send some tourists up to the moon, so we're gonna develop our own rocket. All right, and we need to make
Right.
money. Step aside. Yeah.
Well,
So
and,
absolutely, that theory that you're talking about is very, very plausible.
and if some of these scenarios do turn out to be, that somebody has managed to get a hold of, either an intact or parts of an extraterrestrial spacecraft, more than likely, the technology is going to be so far beyond us that it's not like you see in the movies where they're able to pull these things apart and go, oh, look at here, this is an alien spark plug, and and then
Exactly.
be able to
right.
be able to recreate it in a hangar someplace. More than likely it's going to be, they're going to look at this stuff much like, say, Isaac Newton would look at a smartphone. It's just like, oh my gosh, it's witchcraft. Get it
You
out
don't
of
know
my
what
phone.
you have.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you, and this is one last scenario of maybe one of these days we'll get the disclosure from an unexpected. I was reading a story today about these people that bought a house that was in their neighborhood. It was a hoarder had lived there. It had fallen into disrepair. They kind of bought it and they were going to flip it. They go in there and they find 2 safes. Okay. One of them had been opened and robbed, but the other one, which weighed 4,000 pounds, they finally got it open. And it's full of ammunitions, pictures of strippers, a bunch of stuff. Apparently, whoever was there was blackmailing people. It's like, God knows, jewelry, 4,000-pound safe. It's huge. Okay. And I'm thinking, one of these days, somebody's going to buy some 60-year-old house and they're going to find something in there and they're going to open it. And there's E.T., frozen in the thing. So that could happen.
Yes.
You never know. Somebody that did come across something that said, hell, I'm not calling the government on this. Forget it. I'll keep it to myself. Puts it away, stores it, whether it's technology or a body or, pieces of a ship, whatever. And just puts it away, keeps quiet,
Yeah.
And then 60 years later, somebody, like these people, the house is totally wrecked. And they just came across these things piled. It was a hoarder. Whoever was there at some point was hoarding stuff. And they come across these 2 safes, and one is a 4,000-pound safe with a bunch of stuff in it. They said that, like, really questionable, like, even stuff that they say it had to look. In other words, that they were saying they weren't going to say what it was, but that they were going to have to turn it over to the authorities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Yeah.
again, we always think of, either the government or the corporation, but you never know. There might be this one solitary person who's got the key to everything.
We have there's a chapter in our most recent book, Alien Artifacts, available on Amazon.com, by the way.
Yes, of course.
That was written by Calvin Parker. Now, if you're not familiar with Calvin Parker was one of 2 men who were involved in a very bizarre UFO abduction in Pascagoula, Mississippi
Yes.
in 1977. Well, Calvin, after he had this experience, he basically, he wanted nothing to do with what happened. We had talked about this earlier about how some people, it just completely ruins their life.
Is Calvin the younger one?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
He's the one who's currently still alive.
Right. I was going to say, I don't want to assume, but yeah, okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
right. So, I mean, he basically ran away and just got out of the limelight and tried to forget about his incident. And it wasn't until years and years later that his wife and his daughter actually, said to him, people need to know what happened with you. I mean, you've got the media reports, but you've never really come forward to say what happened to you. So he actually, with the help of Philip Mantle, who has a publishing company out of the United Kingdom, wrote a book about his experiences. And this is somebody who, he could have easily have come clean and said, yeah, me and this other guy when we were younger, we faked everything, and
it was a slow fishing day.
Yeah. But instead, he's just like, nope, it all happened. It happened exactly like I said. But the piece that we have in our book, he talks about how shortly after he came forward again, after he was an adult, that he was brought into contact with Jesse Marcel Jr., the gentleman who was involved with the original Roswell case. And the two met up, and Mr. Marcel told Calvin that he actually still had some pieces from the Roswell crash, that he had managed to keep these things and to keep them secretly, and that he had them in a box in his house, and I can't remember if he was I think he was living in Texas. I'd have to go back, read the article again. But anyway, that he still, and he had like this place like behind his hot water heater in the basement in his house. You have to remember, he's an old man at this point, and he doesn't really have anything to lose, but he just wanted to talk with this guy. I mean, here they have something in common, and I guess he showed Calvin the box and the pieces inside, and that Calvin was going to go and visit him again a few months later, but Mr. Marcel had passed away. And so he has no idea if that box is still hidden in that house, or whether or not he was, Marcel was able to pass it along before he died, or what. But there's a perfect example of a situation that something like this could someday come out that would blow everything out of the water.
Sure, right, exactly. Somebody that didn't go to the media, didn't go to the government, didn't say anything, and said, you know what, I'm just gonna keep this stuff, and maybe I'll wait for the right time. The right time never gets there. The years go by, and then it happens, or like what you just said, the person dies. That's a great. I think that maybe one of these days that might turn out to be. Everybody's got, that would be fantastic. What a great story that would be.
Well, and unfortunately, the problem is that with a lot of this, because there's, as we point out in this book, over the years, there's been a lot of stuff that has been found that's been associated, with UFO encounters, crashes, other, bizarre circumstances. But the strange thing about a lot of these items is that they appear to be very terrestrial in origin, even though they obviously came from a very unusual circumstances. There was one situation that happened in Grand Bluffs in 1977, where people saw this red object flying over the far end of town, close to the levee. And it came down, and when people got to the scene, they said it looked like there was a giant sparkler on this levee, and there was like this huge mound of molten metal that was actually flowing down this levee, like you would see from a volcano or something like that. When the police got there shortly thereafter, this metal was still molten. A meteorite never hits hot. When a meteorite comes down, it's cold. All right,
Okay.
you see on the movies and stuff, a meteorite
Right.
comes down, and there's fire and debris, and
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not like that. This and I mean, there was like pounds of this material that nobody could explain where it came from. It's not like that anybody could hoax this, because you would have to have like a vat, a steel vat, to be able to transport this molten metal to a location and then dump it out without killing yourself and the
It's
people involved.
impossible. It's
Right,
impossible.
right. However, when an analysis was done on this metal, it was found to be iron, just plain iron. It even had slag in it. Like you would expect.
Like in one of those foundries or something.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
exactly. And there were foundries, in this area. But again, a number of people saw this thing first flying in the sky, and then come down and land on the ground. So where did this stuff come from?
Good question.
Yeah, it couldn't have been a hoax. And if it was part of, say, an extraterrestrial spacecraft, why is it just iron that obviously appears to, come from terrestrial sources? And we see that in a number of these fascinating cases where there was a case in South America where over this town people saw, like UFOs flying around. One of them dipped really close to the ground, kind of tilted, and ejected a stream of a silvery substance. Afterwards, people went and looked, and splattered on the streets and on the houses and on laundry that was hanging up, like between windows, was the solidified, and it was a metal, but it turned out to be tin, just regular old tin. Now, the unusual thing with this and some of the others is that some of the other elements that were included with this tin in smaller quantities were wildly out of proportion to what you would normally find under just everyday smelting conditions. Okay, you're always going to have certain other elements in something like tin, first of all, to make sure that it is tin. You got to have some other, and then just in the normal refining process, there's elements and other materials that just are part of the process. Well, what should be normal elements were out of proportion to what you would expect under a
Right, the
terrestrial
manufacturing
condition.
process, if you want to call it that, was something
Yes.
that we didn't know how to do that
Right.
way with the tin.
Yeah,
That's so
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it is. And the big thing now is that you can use isotope detection to determine whether or not that the elements you're dealing with actually came from Earth or from some other planet, because supposedly a different solar system, the isotopic ratio to the elements would be different than what we would find here on Earth. So far, some of these do have different isotopic ratios, but it's still not conclusive, because if you have a satellite that's been in orbit for a while, that may be enough to alter the isotopic ratio in the metal. But some of these cases, the metal has been, or other materials, not just metal, has been discovered before we were even sending rockets and satellites up into
Right.
space.
So how does that?
Yeah,
That is so interesting.
yeah.
Tim, I want to thank you so much, because it has been. I'm like, I have so many. I mean, we could go into so many areas with this, because, like you said, this everything is interrelated. It's just not UFO ufology by itself as a standalone. I think everything connects to everything else, whether you want to call it under the paranormal umbrella. And I know there's people that are very strict about let's not cross the stream, shall we? But I agree with you that there's somehow or other, one thing is, whether on purpose or by coincidence, they share something. God knows what it is. But yeah, that I could ask you about. But it has been absolutely fascinating. And for my podcast listeners, because I'm going to have a link in the credits of the show, what is the website that they can go to?
Sure. They can visit my website. It's www.conspiracyjournal.com. I'll say that again, conspiracyjournal.com. That's I share the site with myself. Used to be part of Tim Beckley's Interlight Global Communication system that we all participated in. Since the death of Tim Beckley, I've carried on with it and hope to continue to do so for a number of years to come. But I always say that it's got all the weird news and information that they don't want you to know.
Unfortunately, yes. Or God knows. Again, thank you so much. It has been absolutely wonderful talking to you, Tim. By the way, do you have other books in the works?
Oh yeah, well, we're always in the process of we're trying to adopt Tim Beckley's methods. I mean, all of us worked for Tim Beckley and worked with him, and while he was alive, we usually were working on about 5 books at the same time. To various degrees of production. So we're trying to pick up, that gauntlet and and carry it forward and continue that process. So it's been a little bit difficult trying to get back up again to do that, but we are doing that, and yes, we do have several other books that are currently in the works, and hopefully we'll be able to get at least one more out before the end of the year.
For the end of the year,
and many more to come.
Fantastic. I hope you'll come back so we could discuss some of those books, and we've got so much we could talk about, Tim.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Anytime. I had a great time talking with you tonight, and I hope your viewers enjoyed this as well.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Wow. Phew. That's like, oh boy, that was good. Because to me, it's like, when you talk to somebody, let me tell you that he's written a lot of books. Usually with a lot of my guests, especially if they release something, I look at the, on Amazon, you can preview it. You can read a little bit of it. And I was reading this last one that he put out, which is titled Alien Artifacts, Incredible Evidence of Exotic Material from UFO Encounters, which is really interesting which is part of why I was asking him that, because we always think of sightings or abductions, but that there's a part of ufology which is people have recovered artifacts. All right. Sometimes maybe, I know in some cases there's people that is photographed, let's say crop circles or some type of proof at this point, besides obviously you could talk about it, where they say burn marks or maybe a craft has come down, but there's people that have actually found like what he was describing that came off in South America, and it turned out to be tin, but let's face it, what type of that we know of man-made ship lets slip a sheet or a spray of melted tin. All right. And again, it's what he's talking about, that sometimes we think that these extraterrestrials, they have these unknown materials from maybe their planet, that's how they get around or what makes things work, and maybe not. Maybe they did, and maybe they ran out, or maybe they're using some of us, like when in Rome do like the road. They're here, they're using what they can from here. Wouldn't it be really interesting if some of these extraterrestrials, let's go down ET lane, they're stuck here. They want to leave, but they can't. There's whatever it is that they need to make them be able to leave back to the planet. They don't have it. The best they can get is some of the materials we have. And it's like, okay, we could use this to get around and hide, but not to take us back to where we want to go to. Or from, wherever it is that we're headed, or back to where they came from. And they've been around, but not because they really want to, it's just because they're stuck. That'd be funny. Here we are thinking they're like they want to conquer us, and they're like, no, we just want to leave, but we can't. So we keep dodging you guys. You're driving us crazy. Oh, you know what? Why not? There's so many theories out there floating around about UFOs and extraterrestrials, and nothing is impossible. Nothing like what Tim was saying. We shouldn't discount any possibility that comes into that area. Really, we can't. And again, people sometimes mistake that if you listen to an idea or theory, that you accept it or you like, oh, I agree with it, or you buy into it. Not necessarily. You can have an open mind. You can listen to it. You can hear it. You could even discuss it. But that doesn't mean you're like, oh yeah, you're right. Absolutely, I believe you. What you suggest? No. Now that between that, you have like what what do they call the open door policies? Like, I'm willing to listen to you, even if it's really way out there, and I may not agree with it. But that's great, because that's really how sometimes a lot of great, what comes of, people just present their ideas, their beliefs, their observations, their theories, blah, 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 their hypothesis, and then somebody turns out to be right. Or somebody says something to you that before you actually explored it with them, you're like, no way, what? That's crazy. And then when you hear it, you're like, man, wait a minute. There's something there that makes sense. Man, how did I thought of that? Like an exchange of ideas kind of deal. But yeah, I think I totally agree with Tim. Especially in these areas, you always need to keep an open mind. Even if it sounds at some point fantastical. That you're like, yeah, whoa. So you saw, what was it, that alien riding on a unicorn? Okay, I'm just using that as an example, but you can always say, hey, maybe that's where the unicorns came from. They're E.T.'s horse. That happens. I mean, God knows that there's a lot of things. Now, the only question I have, which is, why now? Why have the government decided now to go before Congress and all these people? And as a matter of fact, from what I understand, they didn't even really bring the right people to, you know how you go before Congress and you talk about your experience or whatever it is. They were talking to people within the government instead of bringing in, whether it's people who have had their own firsthand experiences, or people, let's say like Tim, that have interviewed a bunch of people and have written books, have maybe had their own experiences or been exposed to it. Instead of bringing these type of people in, if we're going to talk about UFOs or whatever they are, let's bring in people that can bring in a lot of pictures, eyewitness testimony, or their own personal experience. No, they were talking to other people in the government, who, by the way, it's really weird. All of a sudden, once upon a time, being in the government and saying you were a contactee or an abduction was like, well, you're about to be, kicked out the front door. Nobody in the government especially, or any of these agencies having to do with this, wanted to ever admit that they had seen anything, nothing. Now all of a sudden you get these people in these agencies saying that they've been abducted or they've had contact with UFOs. And it's like, what? How did that happen? You? An abductee? A contactee? Call me cynical, but I have good reason. And I'm not a cynical person, by the way. I'm not. I'm kind of naive when it comes to that. But I can't help but think there's something off about the timing on this. As in, why have you, for years and years and ages, and if you believe some stories that there's even been people that have been, because they're going into talking about things that they shouldn't, like, hey, this person is going to talk about or is exploring or is going to write a new story or is interviewing. The next thing you know, that person is bye-bye, or mysteriously, you've never had any suicidal ideation, commit suicide, or, jumped off the building, that kind of deal. Yeah, it's, if some of these, if you believe that version of it, if they've gone through all this trouble to deny it, to keep it under control, to, in some cases, like he was saying, anybody that was aligned with either the UFO community, make him look like a kook. There's a lot of ways you could do that, by the way. In other words, damage their credibility enough that when and if this person ever wrote a story, a book, did an interview, there would be people that say, hey, do you know that person supposedly blah, blah, blah. In other words, you know how they say that if somebody goes to trial, if there's a reasonable doubt, you can't convict. Well, it'd be the thing like, besides the fact that you're talking about something really outlandish, I heard that you were kind of a kook, and that's it. And that's how they do it. They put that crack in the armor, and then that person, yeah, you'll get some people that'll believe them, but their credibility is shot. Again, if all this effort has been made to keep control of this whole UFO subject, when I say UFO, I mean extraterrestrials, UFOs, whatever, all of a sudden they're having meetings about wanting to discuss it. I don't know. There's something there that to me tells me, okay, you want to do this because you want to be transparent about extraterrestrials visiting the Earth. There's people that have sometimes lost their credibility, their jobs, and where you've hushed them up. People would see things and, they shut up because they knew it was a career killer. And now, and I've heard, and this worries me, that I've heard that, I can't remember this gentleman, if he's a senator from which state, it's in the Midwest, saying something about that they need to look at people feeding out misinformation about UFOs, something like the conversation that me and Tim were having, like, in other words, we're going to persecute or, anybody that's putting out false information. Like, it's like, wait a minute, what do you mean? Let's face it. Well, we're talking, let's say that conversation me and Tim were having is like theories, experiences, him talking to people, stories that you hear. But like he said, there's never been any definitive proof. Okay, like I said, short of the mothership landing on the lawn of the White House, which is like, okay, where do you go from there? It's scary to think that having conversations about something like UFOs, which people have been talking about for God knows how long, all of a sudden could be verboten. Like, oh, you're putting out misinformation about UFOs. What? Of course. I don't know. That concerns me when to think that they would consider that a viable idea. Instead of one of two things. Either, great, we need the public's help if you want to come forward and give us your information or your proof. Or two is like, oh, whatever. Let the plebeians, have at it. Let them talk all they want. When you see, again, it always comes back down to control. The reason? Who knows? Anyway, guys, I hope you liked the show. I really enjoyed talking to Tim Swartz. Again, I'm going to have a link to his website on the credits of the show. You can find all his books on Amazon. You can, of course, look it up by his name. And if you look for his author profile, it's going to point you in the direction of all his books. Again, don't forget to go to my website, MiamiGhostChronicles.com or mpelliser.com. And there you have links to any of the videos, the podcasts, to sign up for my Substack articles, anything. And you want to send me an email, that's where you can do it from. And like I said, I'll give you more information about the book that I'm going to be releasing. I'm going to set up for pre-order on Amazon. I need to iron out a little bit some stuff there. And like I said, people don't realize it's not only the writing part, it's the editing part, man. That will eat up your time. That's an effort. But you got to do it. So again, guys, please come back every week. I have so many great guests coming on, okay? Some of them are brand new ones like Tim. There's others that are new, or, like I said, I have have some people that they've written books. Let's face it, some of them I last interviewed them 2, 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and between now and then they've got a lot has happened in their lives, just like everybody. They've written new books, they've gone and done different things, new endeavors. So basically, it's almost like having a new guest on. All right. So again, but if you have any ideas as far as subject, as far as guests, as far as you have a story, send it to me, Marlene at MiamiGhostChronicles.com, and we'll take it from there. All right. So until next time, thank you for spending this time with me. Take care.